One of the stars, Diego Calva. Another of the stars, Margot Robbie. The guy some of you might not have heard of, but he has a great career ahead of him, Brad Pitt. The really extraordinary Gene Smart. Jovan Adepo. The truly remarkable Lee Jung-lee. And last but absolutely by no means least, Tobey Maguire. Does everybody have a microphone? Good. Hopefully they're working too. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for doing all this work. There is so much to talk to you about. We've got about 30 minutes. I don't even know where to begin, but I actually want to start at the beginning. And I think, Damien, that you first started thinking about this idea 15 years ago. What was the idea and how did it change over time?
Well, I'd say the initial germ of it was, I've been a fan of film history for quite some time, and I think especially getting to know sort of the particulars of this sort of early, almost prehistory of Hollywood, the American film industry, Los Angeles as a city. I remember one moment in particular that, sometime around 15 years ago probably, that sort of set me on the road was reading about this kind of weird phenomenon where towards the end of the 20s, there was this sort of rash of suicides, deaths that seemed that they could have been suicidal, drug overdoses. It was a little bit coalescing with the sort of cresting of a drug epidemic going on at the time. And I started to kind of dig into it a little bit, was a little curious as to why exactly that might have been the case, and found it coincided with a transition that I'd sort of seen treated in movies like Singing in the Rain and whatnot, which was namely the transition from silent to sound. But it gave it this kind of brutal face to it that I was not used to. It gave it this sort of, just kind of more of a glare that cast everything I sort of had thought about that era in a different light. And suddenly looking at kind of the types of behaviors that would lead to those sort of outcomes, the kind of extreme living, the kind of passion, ambition, recklessness, unbridledness of all sort of stripes that characterized Hollywood at that time, and that just started my brain going.
What was the hardest part about writing the script?
Eventually it became kind of corralling it into the sort of matrix of things that I really wanted to focus on, because at the end of the day, it's such a sort of vast panorama, ultimately it became this sort of idea of it's going to be an ensemble piece. It's going to be anchored by a certain number of characters who are going to guide us through this tumultuous time, especially guide us through basically the end of an era, the sort of passage from one era to another. It had to become a human story ultimately. I wanted to kind of use a gallery of human beings to sort of refract on a wider social change that was going on at the time that just fascinated me. But I think that the challenge became sort of how to kind of distill it down to that gallery of characters. And then of course that's a challenge that winds up being a baton passed to the actors.
I think at some point you had a 4-hour plus movie. I think your wife just told me, who's also the producer and plays the director, just incredibly well cast, Yeah, Olivia. The William Goldman line, you have to sacrifice your darlings. What did you lose?
I think each of the actors here probably has specific instances in their head of, it was definitely a fresco of it was a big meal of a screenplay.
You had a whole what in Mexico?
We had a whole trip to Mexico.
Did you?
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah, there was a giant food fight.
There was a spaghetti
that Gene was
fight.
reminding me of.
Yeah, remember?
The food fight, I missed the food fight.
People in the bathtub. Yeah, there's heaps of stuff.
Yeah, poor Gene. We had this scene that you'd think it wouldn't have been the hardest scene in the movie with the battle scenes and all this stuff, but this was the hardest scene in the movie. Was this food fight of marinara sauce that took place at Margot Robbie's character's house, and Gene was playing Eleanor, who's coming there to kind of write a sort of puff piece, and some kind of ex-boyfriends of Nellie's show up, and they get angry, and they start throwing food. But we had to it's one of those things where we had to sort of shoot every angle of it before shooting Jean, because her costumes were not things that we didn't have doubles of a lot of these costumes.
No, really?
You can't just throw marinara sauce on it. It's a whole thing.
Wow.
And then, so we had this, Jean and I were just remembering, we had this poor special effects guy who it was all riding on him to just hold this marinara and get ready and just aim.
And you
aim exactly right. And
Okay.
we went way over that day too, I think.
I was surprised how much stayed in the movie. The script was 180 pages.
Wow.
It's hard enough to get 120 pages shoehorn that into a film. And my first question to Damien was, great, but what's going to get cut? And he said, nothing. I'm going to pace this thing a minute a page. And it pretty much turned out that way, I got to say, to Damien's credit.
Do you remember your first conversation with him, Brad, and what was that, where you met, what that was about? Aha.
You remember? Well, I said, are you sure?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, you had some concerns of.
I was trying to sell you on some of my other.
What was the conversation? I mean, had you read the script when you met? Was it, hey, Brad, I'd like you to do this?
Well, I've been, ever since Whiplash, of course. No question. Damien stood out as an original voice, and the guy was going to be around a while. And so I was pretty thrilled when to get the call. And then I read the script, and it's just, you saw, it's mayhem. And really well grounded. And so I think our first conversations were just really about the period and understanding the period in the Wild Wild West. I had kind of dismissed that era, hadn't really paid attention to it because it's not an acting style I relate to. It's not what we gravitate to now. It's very big. They had to communicate, because they don't have language, of course. They had to communicate with the face. It really was. And it wasn't until I sat down and saw some of the films that Damien's urging that you find the real charm in them and the warmth in them.
Which films did he get you to watch?
Well, a lot of course, John Gilbert and some Fairbanks and Valentino, stuff like that. But we had a lot of conversations about Joan of Arc. It's so beautifully shot.
Yes, Cathedral Drive. Did a lot of these characters are based on real life people? For all of you, who did you draw on? Hedda Hopper or Llewellyn Parsons?
Yes, she was a little before them, but yeah.
Don't
Sorry.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. My first time holding a microphone. Well, Hedda was a little later, but sure. I mean, Eleanor is kind of, everybody's like doesn't really like her and is a little bit afraid of her, but they're nice to her because she kind of has the power to make or break careers a little bit, and so she's invited to all the parties, and she just sits back and watches everybody go insane and writes her column. Yeah.
How did you go about preparing for the role, and were you doing it at the same time as Hacks?
No, not at the same time. No, it was a little bit after. I had a couple months, I think. But the summer, I guess I had the summer, before we started, and I had a wonderful dialect coach named Suzanne Selby, and these unbelievable costumes, and they brought in a milliner to make me all these great hats. It was great fun.
Did you read a lot about the era?
I did, and I read about some women who were early screenwriters that nobody has really known much about, and things like that, and it was fun.
Margot, how much was this based on Clara Bow?
I mean, I think in a lot of cases for our characters, a lot of it is based on real people or an amalgamation of a number of real people, and I think that's definitely the case for Nellie. And I would say, Damien could probably tell you better because he wrote Nellie, but I'd say a lot of her is inspired by Clara Bow, and I definitely found a lot of inspiration when I researched Clara Bow, amongst other people as well. But Clara was probably the biggest for me. Yeah.
Was it a difficult role for you?
It was. I love her so much, but she's so exhausting.
Did you take her home with you at night?
Yeah, she took everything from me. I remember I'd written on the front of my script, demand their full attention, always, demand their attention. And she did it to me, she just demanded everything, physically and emotionally. And just I by the end of the first week of shooting, I came home and I remember I said to my husband, I was like, this is the hardest I've ever worked. And he was like, what? You always work hard. I'm like, no, this movie is this is something else. And Damien, my favorite thing about him amongst many is that he expects so much of you as an actor. We did our first take and I gave it a lot. I go big on the first take, and then I kind of, director's like, okay, settle down a little bit, and then somewhere around take 4, they're like, yeah, we're good. So I know I go big on first takes, and Damien comes up to me, twirling his hair as he does, that thing that he said, which means that you haven't given him what he needs yet. So he came up and he's like, yeah, that was great, just need way more. I was like, more than what I just did? And he's like, way more than that. And I was like, holy shit, I don't know if I had more. That was kind of it. So that was indicative of the entire experience, really, and my experience.
Do you get scared taking on a role like that?
I remember reading the script and being particularly terrified and excited by the whole thing, but I remember thinking, I know, when you read a script and you're like, okay, I think I know how to do that. I kind of know how to do that, maybe. Oh, I don't know, I'll have to research that. It was the rattlesnake scene and the
oh, I love that scene.
The throwing up scene. Those were two things where I was like,
the audience here applauded.
You did really?
I snuck in, so.
I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do for that. I had even up until the night before, I was like, holy shit, I don't know what to do in these scenes. It's so insane. We found it. I don't know, I guess you liked it, cool.
For all of you, what was the toughest moment? Tobey. Tobey told me he was fine if I didn't ask him any questions. I said the audience would not be fine, so he's living proof.
The toughest moment, I would say, honestly, it was all a lot of fun, but I, like you, Margot, I think it was the first take I did. It was the first take of the big scene that I did, and I just had so many nerves that I just kind of exploded in the take, because it's a long scene and a lot of lines, so I'd gone over it and over and over it, and kind of as I was practicing the scene, I just did all kinds of weird stuff because I didn't really know what the character was yet, and Damien and I were kind of building the character on the go. So my first take, Matt Pluff, who produced the film, one of the producers of the film, he was like, you can go to a 16 here out of 10. Go to, you can really stretch it out. I was like, okay. And I just exploded in a ball of nerves and crazy weird expression that was not coherent or consistent. And right at the end of that take, it was, okay, it's lunchtime. That was a good, that was a really good, interesting, and weird lunch.
Did you eat?
Yeah, I actually was fairly comfortable, and then I went, I think I'm gonna do that on every show I ever do, because it just like all of the humiliation was done with.
Lily, how about you? And by the way, you were so extraordinary in this film. You know, I was dazzled. What was the toughest part of it for you?
Sucking the venom out of Margot. I'm so sorry. It's just
It was
that
so messy.
it was so messy. It was just, she had this thing that was stuck on her neck and it had honey in there. And we were in the desert and she's wearing just overalls and I'm wearing a silk dress and we're freezing. And we're both just shaking. And Damien's like in 3 layers under his can of booze. And he's like, oh, are you guys cold? And he's like, okay, can you suck harder? I'm like, and there's sand and grit and just, can you suck harder and then just really spit it and do it again and get really into it? And it just wasn't good enough. And that was not the challenge I thought I would face filming the show, this movie. Yeah, but that, I mean, yes, that was the hardest part.
Were you nervous when you auditioned? Was it with Damien? Was it with some of the other cast?
It was, I think I was one of the first ones to be cast. It was right before COVID hit the States. I had auditioned around Christmas time, right after Christmas time. And then, I mean, when it came in my email, I was like, oh, yes, I have to. And then when I sent in my tape, and Damien said that he wanted to meet me, and I thought, I've been flying during COVID. Oh my gosh, it's gonna hit us. And I wore a mask on the plane. Everyone looked at me like I was crazy. I met with Damien. We had about a 90-minute session. It was so great. It was, you know, and I don't get that often when you come out of an audition and you feel like I really did everything I could. I did my best work, and if that doesn't go, then I'm okay with that. I'm at peace with that. And then a week later, I got a little weird cold after coming back from, but it didn't matter because I was driving when my team called and they said, you got it, and I think I blacked out.
While driving. Jovan, how about you? What was the toughest moment for you?
The toughest thing for me was learning to play the trumpet.
Are you serious? Wow.
I did what many actors do, they lie on their resume. So when the audition ticket came in, I was in Vancouver at the time, around the same time, like right before the pandemic hit the States. And my agent was like, you play the trumpet? And I was like, yeah. I played it briefly in middle school, but I hadn't really, you know, playing like Mary Had a Little Lamb at that time. And she was like, can you play like Justin Hurwitz type? And I was like, ask that question later. Let's just get the audition. But that was by far the hardest thing because I don't read music. I don't understand the notes or anything like that. So Damien was patient enough to say, hey, you have time, you have a few months, figure it out. And so I met with my coach. Dan Fernero was a brilliant trumpeter in his own right. And they basically found a system for me, not to go way too much movie magic, but for me to learn the 3 valves on the trumpet. And my coach would play all of the songs that we were playing. Like we heard the score months before anybody else heard it.
Because I remember actually sitting in the editing room with you doing First Man, and Justin was running in and out with new pieces of music.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
You know?
He's brilliant as he was pumping them out. And, he's still trying to figure out what the songs were going to be like. I was like learning them, and we would hop on Zooms with Damien. He's like, Javon, how are you playing? And I'm like, yeah, it's good, it's going great. Just lying on my ass, right? Just like it's not going well. But the scariest part about that before we even started filming was like I went to go visit him when we were still trying to figure out like costumes and stuff. And my coach was like, yeah, he can actually play. And so I learned to play, what was the name of the song? think it's Mo Bet, like the actual song for the movie Mo Better Blues with Denzel Washington, who also played the trumpet. And I played that song in front of him and the guy who actually played the music for the movie. And I was like scared, and I think I played it okay.
You did very well. I remember, yeah.
You didn't say let's make it a saxophone instead at this point. So.
No, well, trumpet is one of the. I mean, you can speak to it. It's. I don't know. I'm a drummer, but I've always found trumpet to be, just from the outside, the hardest of the sort of jazz band instruments. It's hard on your lips. It's hard on everything. It's a very physical instrument.
Gene, does it get easier or harder as you go along?
Acting?
Yeah. Life.
Life, definitely.
We can all comment about that.
Oh, I guess in some ways it gets easier. I mean, you stop worrying so much about what other people are thinking, and you do what you think is right. And I was thinking about what you just asked them, and that first tracking shot. Damien and I were just talking about that first tracking shot in that party with the chicken that's high on cocaine. He's trying to get the chicken out, and that tracking shot went on forever with about 37 insane things happening in it, like people snorting coke off naked bodies and things. And you're thinking, I don't want to be the one to screw this up and go back to number one. But I remember thinking, thank God we have some really uninhibited extras in Los Angeles. Man, they were unreal. Hats off to you guys. Oh, I just remember thinking, okay, I was looking around and I'm going, oh God, just don't look down and don't back out. You'll be fine.
I can't imagine you ever screwing up, do you?
Me?
Or did you?
Sure. We all do. Of course. Thank you.
Brad, what was the toughest part for you?
Well, I can't even sing Happy Birthday, let alone opera. So I actually, just for those like 2 little verses, I think I worked about 3 months, like 3 times a week, yeah.
How do you prepare for a role like this?
I mean, I don't have any formula. I mean, you just immerse yourself in the world. A lot of talks with Damien. You just start feeling it. To me, it's always been kind of something you kind of grope your way into, and then it starts to fit and it starts to feel right. And that feels good, and that doesn't feel right, and you kind of, I don't know, it finds its pace that way.
Is your script covered with notes? Do you work with an acting coach, or do you just go into everything intuitively?
Oh, I've worked at times, like it was probably about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I thought I was really hitting a wall, so I started all over again with an acting coach.
Really?
Yeah, just to start breaking it down again, and I just needed I was getting too loose or something. And that was really, really helpful. So it's something I would go back to depending on the role, certainly.
What did that coach change about the way you approached acting?
Fuck if I know. No, it was, I mean, I do find so much of it intuitive, but it was just going back to the basics, the A, B, and C's, the breaking down a scene, what are you after, what are you looking for, where are you coming from, just the simple, strokes. Yeah.
Margot, what was the toughest for you? Besides the Mexican food fight?
The toughest, like I said, I think just keeping up the level of energy and commitment, at the end of the day or after doing dance sequences or whatever, or months into the shoot or, whatever it was, just Nellie had to be like that every single second that she was on screen. So yeah, probably just keeping up the energy levels, really.
Was it hard to empathize with her?
No. I don't know what that says about me, but no. I think because I spent so long crafting her childhood in my head, that anything could be justified in my mind. Anything. She could kill someone and I'd be like, I know where she's coming from though. Like, she just, I know I'm talking about a fictional character right now, but she had a horrible, horrible childhood. So she,
And so did Clara Bow, I think.
Which was large, I took a lot of Clara Bow's, real life history, which is about as bad as a childhood anyone could have. So, once you kind of have that in your head, very easy to justify Nellie's actions.
Diego, I think Damien spotted a photo of you. How did it all come about? And who took this incredible photo? Because clearly, walk us through the first steps. How did you hear about it and what happened?
No, they just sent me like a casting. Nobody said it was a Damien Chazelle movie, of course. And then I sent a self-tape. And then Damien called me. Hey, I'm Damien Chazelle. Super casual, you know? And we started like texting, and I sent like, I think, another video. And then COVID happened, so it was like a long process. But that was kind of useful, no? We had like a lot of time to work, but I don't know, I think luck. He saw a picture.
Was it difficult for you to take on a major role like that, and what did you find the most difficult?
This.
And it's going to get a lot worse.
But no. But no, I'm very lucky. I don't know. Come on. My life just changed like in the few years. I worked with Margot, Robbie, with Robbie, with Tobey, with crazy. But I have to say, it's all Damien, because Damien and we worked a lot. He gave me the time to work in my English, for example, to work in my accent, to learn how to ride a horse, to have an acting coach, to rehearse. We rehearsed the whole movie in his backyard. Only like Olivia, Damien, and I, so I think it's a very uncommon kind of situation.
I have a great, it's a very tight 2 hours version of the movie, the entire movie, on an iPhone in our backyard with Diego.
And Olivia is playing all of you guys. Olivia playing like
And
Jack and
plays
Nellie
every
and
other
everyone.
role.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Did you play any of the roles?
Not quite as good, but you know.
Damien, did you play any of the roles?
I think sometimes when there's a scene with like 3 other people.
Or the guns, remember?
Right now.
The effect of the
You know Damien's in this movie.
Oh, I did
There's-
sound effects.
There's
I did
heaps
bang.
of things where that's Damien's voice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Every time somebody's laughing of
I can hear it.
a character, it's Damien laugh.
Yeah. And the guy shit talking about Nellie, that's Damien. And the camera guy who calls out to his friend, he's like, "Hey, what's the difference?" That's Damien off camera. Yeah. And
This
this
is you. You're adding.
no, I swear I've heard more.
Maybe in the rough cut.
Brad, you were going to say
4 hours,
I'm
rough.
I'm telling them you're a good
It's the
actor.
4-hour cut.
I actually fought to keep Damien outside the bathroom talking shit about me. So spot on.
Well, just to sort of wrap up, I want to come back to you and the preparation you did for this. And one of the things that fascinates is that you and Matt Plough, when you were talking about it, set up screenings of some of the great classic films. Which ones did you watch, and why was that so important?
Well, it was a little bit of a mix of movies from the era that we were trying to, sort of get under the hood a little bit of how exactly the kind of film industry that could lead to the making of something like, it's a little predates this the era in this film a bit, but something like Intolerance, something of that kind of scale, or something like Stroheim's Greed, or across the pond movies like Pandora's Box or Passion of Joan of Arc, some of the sort of great masterpieces of the silent era that just, I think that's one of the tragedies in a way, that silent film got cut off basically right at its prime, and so you feel then, hopefully, I tried to kind of convey that in the movie. You really feel that loss when that change comes in. you know, and I think otherwise, yeah, we would sort of cast a wide net, you know, just as I was sort of writing the script, as we were doing research over the years, that sort of, you know, cobbling it together, you know, look at things like, I mean, stuff you probably kind of, you can see the influences in the film, you know, things like Dolce Vita and, you know, Nashville and movies of that ilk. But I think especially trying to capture the sort of the panoramic, the sort of epic, larger than lifeness of that era, or at least the sort of what leapt out from the page when I was researching that era, that these were people who just gave everything to what they were doing, and that can result in great art. It can also result in wrecked lives. It can result in a ton of collateral damage. You can say the same thing about any sort of technological change that the society goes through, that you feel this collateral damage that history, you know, brushes away, sort of wipes away, but actually looking at it with a microscope, you see the toll that it takes. So I think trying to just kind of give a sense of reality to that and to the enormity of that sort of requires painting a full picture of that society, and then a full picture, ideally, of what happens when a wrecking ball comes to that society.
Last question for all of you. Has it left you with a nostalgia for what Hollywood was, or the opposite?
It's the same, no? I just arrived there.
Tobey and Gene, what do you think?
I thought that was a mic drop right there.
Well, you know, the thing about movies, I was saying to somebody the other day, and it's true of a lot of industries, is that the people who started it, they were there because, not to get famous and get rich necessarily, but I mean because this was a new thing, and they wanted to make movies, and they came out to California. There was all this wide open space, and you could shoot, you know, anywhere, and immediately then the industry eventually gets taken over by businessmen and lawyers, and the priorities change. But the people who started it did it because it was like, oh my God, let's make a movie, this new thing that's been created. And people would watch anything. Then they'd watch somebody, you know, getting on a trolley car. They'd watch a train come through the screen. They'd watch, you know, just seeing people on a screen was fascinating. And now it's so, we're so kind of jaded, is that we have to keep upping the ante to get the audience excited, you know.
I think there's way less drugs now too.
Sadly true.
On that note, I want to thank all of you, and the audience too, for staying for this. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.